There's a specific smell to my grandmother Hazel's backyard. It smells like wet earth, crushed mint, and stubbornness. Most people look at a garden and see a hobby. Hazel looked at her quarter-acre plot in southeast Portland and saw a fortress. She bought that house in 1968, back when the neighborhood was working class and rough around the edges. She raised 3 kids on that land. She buried 2 husbands. And every single year, come rain or shine, she planted. But last spring, the garden stopped being a sanctuary. It became a battlefield. I'm going to tell you the story of how an 89-year-old woman took on a $1 million real estate developer with nothing but a shovel and a secret from her past. It gets pretty intense. There were lawyers, ambulances, and a moment I honestly thought we lost her. If you enjoy stories about real justice and the kind of family bonds that don't break, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It helps us share more of these real-life battles. And hey, share this with a friend who loves their grandma. We all need a little inspiration these days. Thanks. Now, let's step into the dirt. It started, as these things often do, with silence. The sweet old couple next door, the Gibsons, moved to an assisted living facility. We were sad to see them go. Then came the noise. The for sale sign didn't even hit the lawn before the trucks arrived. The buyer wasn't a family. It was a company called Apex Modern Living, and the man running the show was a guy named Trent. Trent was everything my grandma Hazel wasn't. She was flannel and dirt. He was Italian suits and shiny shoes. He didn't walk, he strutted. He bought the Gibsons' lot, knocked the house down in 2 days, and unveiled his plan, a 3-story, ultra-modern micro-condo complex, a giant gray box of glass and steel that would loom directly over Hazel's garden. I remember the day the trouble started. I was over at Hazel's fixing a leaky faucet. She was out back, tending to her wild patch. Now, you have to understand the wild patch. To the untrained eye, it looked like a mess. It was in the back corner, right against the property line. Tall, strange stalks, purple flowers, and tangled vines. Hazel never let anyone weed it. "Leave it be, Sammy. That's the history." Trent walked up to the fence line that day. He didn't say hello. "Ma'am," he shouted over the sound of his excavator, "ma'am, you need to clear that brush." Hazel stood up. She was 5'2", shrinking with age, but her eyes were sharp blue flint. "This isn't brush, young man. It's a garden." "It's a fire hazard," Trent lied, "and it's ugly. I'm putting in floor-to-ceiling windows on this side. My buyers don't want to look at a compost heap. Clear it out by Monday or my crew will do it for you. You touch one leaf on this side of the fence and you will regret it," Hazel said, her voice low and steady. Trent just laughed. "This isn't 1970, sweetheart. Property values matter more than your hobby." He didn't know it yet, but he had just kicked a hornet's nest. The war began with accidents. First, it was the debris. Roof shingles from his demolition accidentally fell into Hazel's prize-winning tomatoes. Then, a portable toilet was placed right against her kitchen window. The smell was awful. Hazel, stubborn as she was, refused to leave. "I'm not letting a bully push me out of my own home, Sam." But then Trent got malicious. He needed more space for his foundation, but Hazel's property line was in the way. He tried to buy her out. He offered $200,000. The land was worth $500,000. She tore the check up and mailed the pieces back to him in a box of manure. So Trent decided to play dirty. He hired a surveyor who, surprise, surprise, claimed that Hazel's fence was 3 feet over the line. He claimed the wild patch actually belonged to him. "I'm taking the fence down on Friday," Trent told me when I confronted him, "and I'm bulldozing that weed patch to pour concrete. Grandma has lived here for 50 years. That fence has been there since the moon landing. You can't just move it." "Watch me," he sneered. Progress, buddy. Get on board or get run over. That Friday was the worst day of my life. I was at work when I got the call. It was Mrs. Gable across the street. She was screaming, "Sam, come quick. It's Hazel. The ambulance is here." I drove 90 miles per hour. When I got there, the street was blocked by police and EMS. Trent had made good on his threat. His crew had come in with chainsaws. They had cut down the old cedar fence, and they had started ripping up the wild patch. Hazel had run out of the house. She had thrown herself in front of the excavator, screaming for them to stop. She didn't get hit by the machine. Her heart just gave out. I found her on a stretcher, an oxygen mask on her face. She looked so small, so pale. "She's an AFib," the paramedic told me. "Her blood pressure is through the roof. We need to go, now." As they loaded her in, I looked at the yard. The fence was gone. The wild patch was half destroyed, trampled by muddy work boots. Trent was standing by his truck, on his phone, looking annoyed that the ambulance was blocking his delivery. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to burn his project to the ground, but I had to go with Hazel. The next 3 days were a blur of hospital beeps and bad coffee. Hazel had suffered a minor stroke brought on by extreme stress. The doctors said she would survive, but she couldn't live alone anymore, and she certainly couldn't handle a legal battle. "You should sell the house, Sam," my mom said, crying in the waiting room. "It's not worth her life. Let Trent have it." It felt like defeat. It felt like evil had won. On the third night, Hazel woke up. She couldn't speak well. The stroke had affected her speech, but she was frantic. She kept grabbing my hand, trying to say something. "The box, Sam. The roots. Rest, Grandma. The garden doesn't matter." "No." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Not weeds, Sam. Save the roots." She was desperate. Tears were streaming down her face. I promised her I would go check. I thought she was just confused. I didn't know she was sending me to find the weapon that would save us. I went back to the house. It was raining. The backyard was a mud pit. Trent's crew had stopped work because of the police report I filed, but the damage was done. I walked over to the trampled remains of the wild patch. Most of it was gone, but deep in the mud where the excavator bucket hadn't reached, I saw them. Thick, tuberous roots and a few surviving stalks of that strange plant. I remembered Hazel saying, "the box." I went into her sewing room. On the top shelf, there was an old, dusty metal lockbox. I found the key in her drawer. Inside wasn't money, it wasn't jewelry, it was letters, dozens of them, and a certificate from the 1950s. The letters were from her father, my great-grandfather. He was a botanist. I started reading. "My dearest Hazel, I am sending you the seeds we discussed. You must keep them safe. This strain of Camassia quamash is distinctive to the Willamette Valley indigenous trade routes. It was thought to be extinct in the urban zone. You are the keeper now." I froze. I pulled out my phone and Googled it. Camassia quamash. Camas. But then I found a second document. It was a land easement agreement from 1972, signed by the city and the previous owner of the lot Trent now owned. The rear 10 feet of Lot 4B, Trent's lot, is designated a historical indigenous heritage easement due to the presence of cultivated ethnobotanical samples. No permanent structures or soil disruption is permitted. My jaw hit the floor. Hazel hadn't just been growing weeds, she had been maintaining a protected historical easement that her father had identified decades ago. The wild patch wasn't even technically on her land. It was on an easement that Trent legally couldn't touch. And the fence? The fence was exactly where it was supposed to be to protect that easement. I didn't sloop. I called a friend of mine who works in environmental law. I sent him photos of the documents. "Sam," he said at 3 a.m., "if this easement is real and if those plants are what you say they are, this guy Trent is in a world of trouble. Disputing a heritage site in Oregon? That's a felony level of negligence." "What do we do?" "We don't just sue him," my friend said. "We bury him." The next morning, Trent was back. He was screaming at his crew to pour the concrete foundation over the easement. I pulled up, but I wasn't alone. I had a city inspector, I had a representative from the Historical Society, and I had 2 police officers. I walked right up to the edge of the mud. "Stop!" I yelled. Trent turned around, his face red. "You again? I told you, I own this dirt. Get lost before I call the cops." "I already called them," I said, pointing to the officers. I handed the city inspector the documents from the lockbox. The inspector put on his glasses. He looked at the paper. He looked at the map. He looked at the hole Trent had dug. The inspector's face went pale. He pulled out a radio. "Dispatch, I need an immediate stop work order on 44th Avenue, code red. We have a heritage violation." Trent stormed over. "What is this? You can't stop me. I'm pouring concrete in an hour." The inspector looked at Trent with pure disgust. "Sir, you have just excavated a recorded historical easement, and if these plants are what this document says they are, you have destroyed protected botanical history. You're not pouring anything. You're done." The fallout was spectacular. Because Trent had ignored the easement that was clearly on the title report, which he had been too arrogant to read closely, his building permit was instantly revoked. But it got better. Because he had caused emotional distress resulting in hospitalization while committing an illegal act, trespassing on the easement, we sued him personally. The project stalled. His investors, realizing he was incompetent and facing a historical preservation nightmare, pulled their funding. The half-dug hole in the backyard sat there for a month. And Hazel? The day I told her the news, she was sitting up in her hospital bed eating Jell-O. "We got him, Grandma," I said. "The easement held up. He can't build. The city is forcing him to restore the land to its original state." She didn't smile. She just nodded, looking out the window. "And the roots?" she asked. "Did he kill them all?" "No," I said. "The deep ones survived. The Historical Society is coming next week to help replant." She closed her eyes and let out a breath she'd been holding for 50 years. Good. 2 months later, Hazel came home. She walked with a cane now. She was slower, but the moment she got out of the car, she went straight to the backyard. It looked different. Trent's abomination of a house was gone. He had been forced to sell the lot to pay his legal fees. The new owner was a local nonprofit land trust that wanted to preserve the green space. The fence was rebuilt, brand new cedar, paid for by Trent's settlement check. But the best part was the wild patch. It was blooming. The disturbance of the soil, ironically, had stimulated the dormant seeds deeper down. The camas was coming up thicker than ever, beautiful stalks of blue and purple waving in the wind. I watched Hazel stand there. She reached out and touched a leaf with her trembling hand. "He thought he could bury us," she whispered. I put my arm around her. "He didn't know who he was messing with." "No," she said, tapping the dirt with her cane. "He didn't know that you can't kill something with roots this deep. You chop it down, it just grows back stronger." We sat on the back porch that evening drinking tea. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the garden. The bees were buzzing. The silence, the peaceful, safe silence had returned. Hazel looked at me. "Sam, when I'm gone, this stays." "I know, Grandma." "No, I mean it. You don't sell, you keep the roots." "I promise." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen in months. "Good. Now go get the hose. These tomatoes aren't going to water themselves." And that, friends, is how Grandma Hazel saved her home with a box of old letters and a patch of weeds. It just goes to show, be careful who you push around. You never know what kind of strength they have buried just beneath the surface. If you're glad Trent got what he deserved, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, what is the one thing in your family's house that you would fight to protect? I read every single comment. Until next time, keep digging, keep fighting, and love your neighbors, the good ones anyway.